On Tuesday, the President signed an executive order directing that policy recommendations be created to protect access to and reduce the cost of in vitro fertilization. This is a campaign promise that he made that ultimately many pro-lifers were hoping and praying was a promise that wouldn't be kept. I want to be clear about something. Children created through IVF are beautiful. They're valued, God loves them, and they have the same value as any other child, created through the marital embrace or not, planned or unplanned, inside or outside of marriage. All human beings have the same inherent dignity because they are made in the image and likeness of God. But it is precisely because of that dignity that we as Catholics, we believe that the process of in vitro fertilization presents several grave moral problems and is ultimately incompatible with the Catholic faith. IVF is a process that disrespects the dignity of human life and causes more deaths of embryonic babies than medical or surgical abortion combined. We as Catholics must oppose this and make our voices known that the process of IVF is not one that we can support. At the moment that male and female gamete cells meet and create a new zygote, a new embryo, a new human being is created. This is undeniable by science. You may have noticed over the past decade or so, the pro-abortion argument has shifted from being, well, it's just a clump of cells, to being, well, the mother has more rights than the baby. That's because they realize they can't argue with the science. From the moment of conception, a new human organism, a new human being is created. And so the disagreement is this. The Catholic Church professes that from the moment of a person's creation, they are made in the image and likeness of God. From the moment of a person's creation, they have infinite dignity and inestimable worth. And it's because of that infinite dignity that we oppose IVF. This dignity demands that children be conceived in the natural way. The Church has long recognized this, even before IVF was an idea in anyone's mind. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote that the rights and dignity of children were violated if they're born to unmarried persons, as children have a right to grow up with two parents in the same household. The child isn't worth any less, but the process itself infringes on their rights and dignity. And so too with IVF. A baby has a right to be held from the very moment of their conception in their mother's womb. It violates their dignity to be made in a petri dish, to be frozen until they're useful, so that for the first few days, weeks, months, years, even decades of their life, they live the life of a science experiment. Children, from the moment of their conception, deserve to be loved, held, and cherished. Not examined as a specimen, not frozen in a lab and held in limbo. And an even more viscerally horrifying reality of IVF is that the discarding and selective reduction of embryos, while IVF is usually seen as a life-giving activity, far more lives are destroyed than are made. I've seen some people saying that, well, IVF brings new life into this world. How can you be opposed to it? IVF is pro-life. But in the average IVF cycle, maybe around 12 eggs will be extracted, 10 of those will be viable, and then 8 will be fertilized, creating 8 new human beings. Around 238,000 people sought IVF treatment in the United States in 2021. Multiply 8 by 238,000 people, That's 1.6 million or more, but less than 100,000 babies were brought to term through these efforts. That means 1.5 million embryos, living human organisms, were never born. Some of those are multiple embryos that were implanted, and then after waiting to see which one was the strongest, the other ones were selectively reduced, terminated, aborted. Some of those are still in petri dishes and will be indefinitely. They'll die in those petri dishes, or they'll be taken out of the freezer one day. 1.5 million. Abortion in the United States only kills around 900,000 each year. That's 1.5 times, again, the number. For every baby born from IVF, 15 are discarded. Through either the process of creation or the process of being destroyed, children of IVF have their dignity violated. And it's not something that Catholics can support. While the Church condemns the process of IVF, I want to acknowledge the deep sadness held by those who struggle with infertility. IVF can seem like a pathway to what so many couples desire. However, can often be a false hope. IVF is a fundamentally predatory industry. Fewer than half of IVF cycles are successful. Those cycles can cost in excess of $10,000 to $15,000. Those who struggle with fertility are often given drugs and recommended treatment like IVF that won't actually address the core of the problem. True healthcare looks at the problem holistically, not just seeking to placate symptoms. Nova Vita is an OBGYN clinic in Maplewood that specializes in this type of healthcare. It's an offshoot of Alpha Clinic, where our own Deacon Patrick Spencer works as a nurse practitioner, and they have helped so many women struggling with fertility, several of whom are friends of mine, to bring new life into this world by using natural restorative medicine. I have friends who thought their childbearing years were over, but then God surprised them, rewarded their trust. Infertility is a cross, and it can feel hopeless when you look around and see other Catholic families with children and wonder when God will bless you. It involves wrestling with God. It involves trust in God. But we cannot do a bad thing to bring about good. We cannot be tempted to turn to unethical treatments like IVF. For those of you who may have undergone IVF treatment, acknowledging that IVF is an unethical and immoral process doesn't mean that you regret your child any more than a person who, confessing premarital relations that caused a pregnancy, regrets the child that comes about through that. God willed that child to come into the world. If he didn't, the child wouldn't be here, even if God didn't approve of the process. If you still have embryos frozen, it's a complex moral issue that Father Duffner and I would be glad to talk with you about. Sacred Heart Guardians is a nonprofit dedicated to the dignified burial of embryos that have been discarded or have died while being frozen. Several times a year, we have burials in our own cemetery from families nationwide who want to give their child a repose that benefits their inherent human dignity. If you find yourself in this situation, again, please reach out. This is obviously a difficult subject because it touches on the lives of so many people, those who struggle with infertility, those who are born from IVF, those who have family and friends who are born from it or who have used it. I want to repeat, and I cannot stress enough, that those who are born from IVF are not bad. God willed them to exist, or they wouldn't be here. He loves them. He gave them dignity. But it is precisely because of that dignity that we must oppose in vitro fertilization, a process that violates the right of the child not to be treated as a science experiment, a process that destroys exponentially more children than are born from it. We cannot allow our tax dollars to subsidize it. We cannot allow our insurance to be forced to pay for it. We have to call our elected representatives and let them know that we oppose such measures from being proposed or advanced in Congress. You don't have to regret your children or your loved ones, but we must affirm true medicine, true health care, and we have to avoid that which violates the dignity of human beings. In vitro fertilization does not respect the dignity of those conceived through it, and for that, we must oppose it.